Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about length. And our essential question is, how do I measure the length of something using a ruler? So today we're actually going to be using some rulers that I found online at the website printableruler.net. And so I've included one of those in your homework packet tonight so that you can use this to measure with as well. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Our first thing we want to remember is that when we are using a ruler, it is important to start at 0. Not at the end of the ruler. This is very important because many times if you look at a ruler, the 0 actually is not at the end. So if you start at the end, you actually add another section to your ruler, which adds something to your length, and it takes away from measuring very accurately. So when you start measuring on a ruler, you need to start right at the 0. So you can see on here we have a printed one. Go ahead and draw yourself a little arrow pointing to that 0. That you know this is where we're going to line up our objects so that we can make sure we have an accurate measurement. Measuring can be very tricky if you're not being careful and paying attention to the small details. So we're going to be looking at some of those little details today to make sure that we understand how to do this. So we're going to start by measuring some basic lines. Remember, when we start measuring, we're going to start with that 0. So we're going to line up our ruler right at the very edge, and we're going to see where the end of our line goes. So on mine, you can see that it goes just past 3. We're going to measure to the nearest ½ inch today. Now this is where the details come in. We have to make sure that we are exactly at the edge, right on the edge of the line. We're lining up right with that 0. And then we need to see where this falls. If the end of my line falls farther than halfway between the 3 and the 3.5, then I have to go up to the half. So I can tell this is my halfway mark between 3 and 3.5. If my line were to fall from here into this area somewhere, I'm going to bump it up to that 3.5. If you look at mine, it does not fall above that line. It falls below it. So I have to bump it back down to just 3 inches. So this line is 3 inches long if we're measuring to the nearest ½ inch. Let's take a look at our next line. Once again, be very careful of those details. Line up at that 0. This time, my line goes past that ½ inch. I need to see if it's far enough along to bump it up to the 4. Between my ½ inch here and my 4, 3.5 and 4, this is the midline. So I need to see if my black line right here goes past that. And you can see it does not. So I'm going to bump it right back to here, which is 3.5 inches. It's paying attention to those little details that will make sure you measure accurately. And look at our next one. Line up at the 0. Okay, what do you think? Will I go back down to 2.5? Will I stay at 3, or do I go up to 3.5? I hope you said you're going to go up to 3. It's past this little mark here, so I know I have to go up to the next ½ inch, which is my 3. Notice that all of these lines are very similar in length. Oh, here's one that's going to be very different. Let's take a look at it. Once again, I'm going to line up at the 0. Okay, what do you think on this one? Write down your answer and then we'll talk about it. Oh, I hope on this one that you wrote down 1 inch. Take a look. This line once again does not go past this one, so I can't go up to my ½ inch. It stays below it, so I have to go down. It's 1 inch. Boys and girls, none of these examples showed us how we went up, so let's draw a quick line and see what that would look like. I would like you to draw a line starting with 0, and I'd like you to go all the way to this little mark right before the 2. So start at 0 and draw all the way up to that little mark right before 2. Okay, so now let's take a look at this line, deciding how we would measure it. We start at our 0 and we go here. I have my 1.5 inch here and my 2 inches here. Notice my little line. On this one, I'm going to have to bump it up to the 2 because it's past this midpoint. If it's right above it, we have to go up. So on this one, I'm going to say it's 2 inches long. Now, what happens if we're trying to measure something that's lined up against a ruler that does not start at 0? Take a look at this ruler I have printed on your page. I'm starting at 2.5 inches, not at 0. And I need to see the distance between the two dots, how far that is, that length. So I'm going to use what I know about a ruler to figure this out. I'm not going to say that this distance between here is 5.5 inches because this dot did not start at the 0. I know that between 4 and 5, that's 1 inch. So I'm going to use that to help me. I also know that from this line to here, that's a 1/2 inch. So then I'd have 1.5 inches. And I have another 1/2 inch right here, so that would be 2 inches. Let's start over here and look at that again. If I start here, and I move it up here, that's only 1/2 inch. And then I go another 1/2 inch, which is an inch, 1.5 inches, and 2 inches. So the distance between this line and this one right here, those two dots, is 2 inches. So even though I didn't start at the 0, as long as I'm paying attention, I won't make a silly mistake and say that this little space right here is 5.5 inches long. Watch those details, that will help you. On our bottom ruler, it's just a blank ruler, but we need to put some points on there and label them. So let's first put a point at 1.5 inches. So I'm going to find my 1. Again, this one does not start at 0, so I have to really pay attention to the markings on the ruler. So there's 1, there's 2. This must be the 1/2. I'm going to put a mark on it, and I'm going to label that point A. Okay, so I can say this is point A at 1.5 inches. Go ahead and put a point at 3 inches and label it B. Alright, I hope you put it right here. That's where B goes, at 3 inches. So there are several different ways we can look at measuring. We can look at it just measuring an actual line. We can look at the distance or the length between 2 points, or we can actually mark on a ruler those points. I'm going to give you a chance now to practice that. On the back of your page, you will see some different practice problems. On these, you're going to measure the lines to the nearest 1/2 inch, just like we did on the front side. And then, if you look at the bottom, it's got a spot for you to fill in a couple blanks. Let's take a look at those. Go all the way towards the bottom. You need to make a dot at 2.5 inches and label it H. And then make another dot at 3 inches and label it I. Okay, so let's look at our whole homework here now. You're first going to measure the lines to the nearest 1/2 inch. So measure this one, write your answer here. Same thing with the second one and the third one. On this one here, please just write down the distance between the first point and the second point, just like we did on the other side. What is the length between those 2 points? And then on your last little section here, you're going to make a dot at 2.5 inches down here on this bottom ruler, label it with H. Make another dot at 3 inches and label it with I. Don't forget to go back and write your 2 questions and your summary. Have a great day.